Hey everyone, well now that the federal election is over and the Liberals did form government once again, although thankfully under minority government at the very least, but they did form government nonetheless. And I can't help but think it was the direct consequence of the kind of top-down impositions, regulations, and restrictions imposed on Canadians as a means to not just suppress voter turnout or pit Canadians against each other or confuse and confound them in terms of foreign or domestic election meddling. I mean, think of all the rhetoric and changes that took place in terms of how this federal election was covered. I mean, let's just talk about the establishment media first and foremost. $600 million goes a long way to carrying favor and making sure that they're reporting on the federal Liberals in a positive light, in a positive manner. So basically, the federal Liberals, with that $600 million taxpayer-funded, forced upon the taxpayer, not like taxpayers chose to, but forced and thrust upon the taxpayer to bail out the established media. You know that went a long way to make sure the established media carried favor for the federal Liberals, which is a reflection of the reality that we all seen and observed during the entire process up into the federal elections. I mean, the media spent the bulk of their time promoting the Liberals and deriding anyone that was challenging them. But in addition to that, you also have the fact that the federal Liberals did their best to bully and impose a lot of restrictions on social media platforms. And how did that happen? How did that come to fruition? Under the guise of foreign meddling. Ooh, the Russian scare, right? Ooh, these Russian trolls that were trying to interfere in our election just like they did in the US. Although in reality, after 2 years of investigation and the Mueller report, well, we've seen that was a complete fiction, a complete fabrication. What it is, at the end of the day, is these progressives, those who represent the ruling establishment, whether it's the US or Canada, they don't want to lose their grip on power, and they'll use any means at their disposal to keep people confused and confounded and divided to secure their stranglehold on that kind of power. I mean, there was restrictions on political advertising and social media. I mean, think about, like I say, there's a multitude of impositions placed on each and every one of us that truly did restrict the democratic process from playing out properly. And even in this CBC News article, it has now finally come to fruition, and now that the election is finally over, that it was all based on bullshit and hype and unfounded fears. Headline out of CBC News Canada analysis: fears of election meddling on social media were overblown, says researchers. There was more coverage of online trolls than actual evidence of them, experts say. And that's enough with the, listen CBC, stop with the use of the word experts, okay? We all know what that means. If they're someone that agrees with you predominantly, or follows along, or aligns with your ideology, they're an expert. Yet if they challenge you in any way, oh, they're just ill-informed, disinformed, or misinformed, right? Or a right-winger. This being reported by Roberto Roca, November 3rd, 2019. Now that the election is over and researchers have combed through the data collected, their conclusion is clear. There was more talk about foreign trolls during the campaign than there was evidence of their activities. So once again, blown completely out of proportion, which is in itself a form of political interference. Make no mistake about that. Although there were a few confirmed cases of attempts to deceive Canadians online, 3 large research teams devoted to detecting coordinated influence campaigns on social media report they found little to worry about. In fact, there were more news reports about malicious activity during the campaign than traces of it, right? So that's the sensationalism, the bullshit fear tactics used by the proponents in the mainstream media. Matter of fact, it might have been some of these very contributors that are now reporting that, hey, nothing to see here, folks, that were promoting that kind of hyper or sensationalized reports in regards to foreign election meddling. Yeah, these people are more than willing and capable of speaking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time or in quick succession. We didn't see high levels of effective disinformation campaigns. We didn't see evidence of effective bot networks in any of the major platforms. Yet we saw a lot of coverage of these things, said Derek Ruths, a professor of computer science at McGill University in Montreal. He monitored social media for foreign meddling during the campaign and, as part of the Digital Democracy Project, scoured the web for signs of disinformation campaigns. Well, you know what? Even if it was disinformation campaigns, this is the insane part of it. It's politics. It's all disinformation. It's all political rhetoric. I mean, we are talking about politics at the end of the day. This ain't science, folks. It's politics. And there's no such thing as an objective standard when you're talking about politics. The vast majority of news stories about disinformation overstated the results and represent them as far more conclusive than they were. It was the case everywhere, with all media, he said. It's a view mirrored by the Ryerson Social Media Lab, which also monitored social media during the campaign. Fears of foreign and domestic interference were overblown. Philip Myatt, co-director of the Social Media Lab, told CBC News. A major focus of monitoring efforts during the campaign was Twitter, a platform favored by politicians, journalists, and partisans of all stripes. It's where a lot of political exchange take place. It's an easy target for automated influence campaigns. Our preliminary analysis of the Twitter hashtag Canadian Poly, suggests that only about 1% of accounts that use the hashtag earlier in the election cycle can be classified as likely to be bots, said Myatt. The word likely is key. Any social media analysis will tell you that detecting bona fide automated accounts that exist solely to spread a message far and wide is incredibly difficult. So only suspect. Anyways, folks, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video below. But once again, and then actually look down there. I actually entice you to read it, because then you get to the point where they're talking about the hashtag Trudeau must go. I mean, that was hyped up as what? The reform influencers, or what? Some Russian bots that were propagating the hashtag Trudeau must go. Listen, no, Canadians were doing that. And just because Canadians like myself are very active on social media doesn't mean we're bots. But you see how the media represented this whole thing in terms of how the election played out. It put the fear, instilled fears in the Canadian people, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the suppression of voter participation and denies Canadians the truth that they needed to make truly informed decisions. The media greatly contributed to the election outcome in this country. That's the kind of election meddling that actually did take place, yet they get away with it scot-free with no punishment or consequences for doing so. And now they just have to come out with an article after the fact saying, oh, gee, sorry. Yeah, sorry, we were all completely wrong. Sorry, we actually were the ones that misinformed you or gave you disinformation. But hey, forget about that. Today's another day. Look the other way. Yeah. That's what the media establishment represents in this country. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.